Today, I'm going to be talking about free will and agency and sovereignty. And I talk more about agency and sovereignty and less about free will, because I think free will is um, such a sort of muddy carpet of conversation to tread on. It's already been so overworn and so cluttered with confusion and argument and all the rest of it. But who we've got here today, F and L approximating X. Emlyn is here and Tom is here. Nice to see you, Emlyn and Tom, and to the other gentleman that joined. Yes, three, your mind. I wish I knew your name, man. I would just say hey and greet you by name. But it's good to have you here. So why do I chat so much? Why am I such an advocate of these ideas of agency? And why don't I talk about free will? Well, I'm going to talk about free will today, and let me just write this down so that I don't forget, or somebody, maybe Tom, you can help remind me. So, agency and free will. Why don't I talk about free will? Does anybody got any idea where they'd like us to start? Because I can start at any of those two places. If I don't get these suggestions, I'll just get cracking. The way I see it is right now, human beings have these demigod-like powers. If we compare ourselves now and the capabilities that we have, the reach that we have, the information that we have at our fingertips, the things that we can do with our technology, the technologies that we have, right? The power that a corporation, I'll switch in a second, and thanks, Tom. Tom says free will is a good place to start. We have a corporation, an average corporation can galvanize 100, 200, 300, up to 1,000 human beings and press gang all of that intentionality, all of that energy, and all of their effort into a social enterprise, which need have zero individual meaning to any of those. Let's call it, the last company I worked for had like 4,500 people. It was a mining company. And that means, on a whim, the chairman, if their personality was big enough, could co-opt 4,500 people with all of those assets and all of those resources and get them to commit to something which had very little individual meaning for any of the people that were complicit in whatever that outcome was, except beyond maybe the story about their titles or their rewards, and then the financial gain that they would get at the end of every month and every year. 100 plus monkeys effect, too enough though. I'm not following that, my man. The 100 plus monkeys effect. I know about it though, and I don't know how that relates to this. And so we have all of this complexity, and we have these social mechanisms by which individuals can decide the future or the fate or the next time horizon and which way we're going and what we're doing with that time. And this can all be manipulated on the internet. It can be manipulated via social media, via pop culture, via multiple ways. Religion does it via shame and via promise of some future reward. And we have these potentials of what we can do with our energy and what we can do with our attention. Right? And what are we supposed to be doing with that? Let's assume that what we're at least supposed to be doing with that is pursuing some form of fulfillment or meaning or happiness for ourselves. Yeah? And investing in ourselves and the kind of lives we'd like to live and the kind of communities we'd like to be part of and the kind of projects we would like to see fulfilled in the world. There's some things we have to do, and we do what we have to so that we can do what we want to. But with all of this godlike power now, all these demigod powers that we have as human beings, the question then comes in how much agency we have, right, to choose what we want to do and how we want to do it and who is choosing for us and what are their agendas. And there's no simple answers there, right? And so that question for me is about agency. Now, Tom actually chipped in just before I started talking, and he said free will is a good place to start. So I started in the wrong place, but let's go back to free will. Why don't I talk about free will much? I used to talk about free will much, but the conversation became so confused, and it became dominated by arguments which all orient themselves on a reductionist premise. What do I mean by that? All of the spicy arguments about free will came largely from people who would consider themselves atheists and reductionists. And by definition, an atheist or reductionist is somebody that doesn't know or can't explain or wants to explain the phenomenon of consciousness as being something that arises out of matter, possibly. In other words, if you just put enough meat together in the right way, you can create like a human brain and a human nervous system, and consciousness is, we assume, has to emerge out of that, right? And you can't really talk about consciousness, about free will, without staking a claim on what you think the phenomenon of consciousness is about. Do you think it arises out of matter, or do you think some other arrangement is going on? Now, there's no ways that we have right now of proving any of that scientifically. All we can do is speculate, and that's another incredible area to get lost in and find our way through, because I think it's worthwhile doing it. But when it comes to free will, the argument tends to be quite simplistic. It's almost to say, hold a second here. Do human beings have free will? Does free will exist? Now, a really, really good argument against that is that everything that we do, right? If I say to you, do you have free will? How many on the call are going to put their hand up and say, I do or don't have free will? My man, I don't get any of that. The dots or I'm not following you, man. And I'd love to engage. I'm just, I don't know where you're going with that. So I'm getting some comments in the comment section that I can't track or respond to. But we were talking about free will. And if I ask the question to an audience and I say, who among you think that you determine you have free will, this choice or this ability that you have to choose for yourself in a moment, to decide what you want to do, what you want to think, what you want to eat, how you want to feel. There's no limits to this. You can't choose how you want to feel in an absolute sense. So if you're feeling unwell, you can't choose to feel well. If you're feeling hungry, you can't choose to not be hungry. If you're on a very, very high diving board and you stand over the edge of that board and you look down and there's a blue surface below you and it looks like a swimming pool, you can choose to jump off it, or you can choose not to jump off it, right? But on the way down, when it dawns on you that this is actually a blue tennis court and it's not a swimming pool, right? You can't choose to not have jumped, right? You now are participating in a sequence of cause and effect that has to play out until some sort of culmination point, at which point you can then perhaps are free to make some further choice. There's a lot of confusion around that, because some people are saying, yes, I do have free will. I'm telling you right now, I chose to get the color of the car that I wanted. I chose a red car, or I chose a Mazda over a Ford, right? And they will call that free will, and they will argue to the death about that. Hey, nobody joined. And then the first challenge to that is this idea of psychological priming and framing, and that it's such a proven fact that we can manipulate our internal workings. And that whatever we experience as a human being, day to day, moment to moment, is not a fixed and static quantity or level, right? We can be more present and we can be less present. And if we're less present, something autonomous in us or in the web of intersectionality of all things is doing that choosing for us. Yeah. It's a bit like this. You start on a hillside that's covered in snow on a toboggan track. Yeah. And you're sitting in your toboggan and you look down and there's a place that you want to get to, right? And so if you are mindful and present, and if you have the ability to accurately steer that toboggan, that assumes that toboggan is steerable, right? And that you have the commensurate skill. You can, as soon as you nudge off the edge and let gravity do its work, you can perhaps steer towards that location that you want to go. But let's say that the nap of the land and the lie of the hill and the awkwardness of the toboggan and whatever the case means that you haven't had a plan for a dozen times that you rode that toboggan all winter. And when you rode that toboggan, the way that the hillside was curved, you kind of end up going to the same spot every single time. Let's call that the default that occurs. Yeah. And then often you're at the top of the hill and you look down to the duck pond and you go, oh man, I really wanted to actually end up on the duck pond. But every single time I seem to get distracted by the enormity of the moment and the rush of the energy and everything. And when I come around, I'm at the shed. I didn't steer towards the duck pond. But one day, right, you become determined and you try and concentrate, and it's a fine thing because there's so many factors of physics and you name it that are pulling you in the other direction, but you sort of manage to struggle your way, but you still don't quite get there. And then one day there's a snowfall, and the snowfall fills the existing toboggan tracks, so that when you tip over the edge, you don't just automatically lean down towards the default that you were going to go towards anyway, and you now suddenly have this opportunity to head where you want it to go. Now, if you think of the way our choices are stacked and how heuristics run and how our autonomic nervous system and our hormones and our limbic system and our various neural pathways, and our subconscious all conspire all the time to be making these kinds of choices for us, right? This is why when people take psychedelics, they say one of the analogies is like having all of your toboggan tracks filled to the brim with snow so that you can steer away from your default thoughts. You can steer away from your recursive thinking. And for the first time, if you are present and if you are being guided and if you are in command of your faculties, you can actually end up at the duck pond. Therein lies my understanding of free will. Free will is like free energy. And I'll get back to that. So my understanding of free will is that you don't get an infinite absolute amount and you don't get none of it, right? Free will is the little bit of wriggle room that you get to make the choices that you would want to make, right? In defiance of the default and where it's trying to pull you in any given choice. Make sense? And why I say it's like free energy is because there is free energy in the room around you right now, but not all of it is harnessable. Yeah. But if I give you a loaded gun, then the energy is stored in the trigger and its spring mechanism and in the gunpowder. Yeah. And in the little primer that goes off to ignite the gunpowder to shoot the bullet out the way. So that's an arrangement of stored energy, but it's not free energy. It can only be channeled and directed in a certain way, but you can still maybe choose where to aim the gun and when to pull the trigger. But you don't have full mastery of all of that arrangement of energy. So there is some free energy that you can, because your body still has energy to lift the gun and point it and pull the trigger at a target or at a moment of your choosing. but you can't choose how all of those physics works, right? And we understand free energy, and we understand that we can't harness all of free energy, because that's what entropy is. Entropy is where their energy doesn't disappear, it just becomes disorganized in a way that is harder to reorganize. Then the energy, it takes more energy from you to do the reorganization than it gives you by collecting all that energy, right? So that's what entropy is. And free will is the same as free energy. There is will at work. There's the will of gravity. There's the will of the hill that's shaped in a certain way. There's the will of the toboggan that's moving down these tracks. And free will is the little bit that you've got that you can decide for yourself. But now we've got two problems. The first problem is oh my gosh, I have somebody at the door. Give me 1 second and I've got no one to answer. Nice. Good morning. How are you? I'm on a telephone call and I really can't. Right. Wait, how can I help? It's just about your gate. Yes, that's okay. Is it working in there? No, it's not. Okay. So can you ask on a little bit for you? Please, will you do that? Yeah, but that's your gate, yeah? Both, actually. But whatever one you've got sent you to do is the one I'd like you to take in there. Thank you, mate. I bet you guys never had that happen in a call before. My wife is dropping a little Maya off at her first day of big school, so only one of us is around to handle that, and I may have lost my train of thought. Free will and free energy. That's right. So it's not to say that none exists, but now it immediately raises two questions. The first question is, how do I know that whatever free will does exist, I am actually the agent of that choice? Yeah. And number two, how do I know that those layers of heuristic and decision making aren't top loaded or pre-programmed in me? Where do I begin and where do I end? So really, this becomes about self-knowledge. And that's why I talk about agency, because agency can be perhaps more about power and how much agency I have in a moment and how much agency I have in my life. In other words, some people that are busy arguing about free will don't even realize that the reason they are arguing about free will is because they want to sound clever, or because the reason they want to argue about free will is they want to prove it right or wrong because it changes their relationship with possibility or with shame or with something else. Unless you're aware of that, and unless you're aware of all the kinds of causes for your choices and the way that you see things and the paradigmatic loading of your predictive model and the Plato's cave that you are in and the story that you're telling yourself and what is true and all the rest of it. So such agency to me becomes a function of self-knowledge, self-awareness, and self-regulation, because we're also not always the same in all moments. What you eat immediately changes how you feel, and how you feel subconsciously invokes subconscious thoughts, feelings, subroutines, waitings, right? I'll give you an example. I can have a coffee. I can go and say, can I have a decaf, please? And they say, do you want one or two shots? And I say, oh, make it a strong tasting one. But I know it's not a problem because it's a decaf. And accidentally, the barista gives me 2 powerful espresso shots at my unawares. And I'm sipping away and enjoying it, and I'm carrying on with my day. And suddenly, I begin to feel the symptoms of anxiety. Now, if I have something happening in my life that connects with that feeling, in the background, my brain is just going to go, okay, boys, we're feeling anxious. The body is telling us these sensations are arriving. Could it be this? Oh my gosh, it's probably that. By the time you become aware of the narrative and the story and what you're stressing about, all of that has been formulated below the umbra of your conscious awareness, right? This is all constantly being formulated all the time behind your awareness. So that to me is an interesting question about agency and a reframing of free will. And then the question of sovereignty comes in. Tom says free will is available locally. The platonic good gives you an ideal to strive for. To be off target results in suffering, and that is a self-corrected mechanism. I agree with what Tom's saying, and I don't know if folks will be able to necessarily follow that, but yes, in a sense, I have a sort of Neoplatonic view of all of that, but that makes a lot of sense to me. It just needs to be unpacked a little bit and related to the circumstances we're talking about. Absolutely, Tom. And if that gentleman F and L minus or approximating X wants to tell me what you actually meant, I'm really interested. Let me know. So the question comes down to self-knowledge and self-awareness. And then immediately the question becomes, where do I begin and where do I end? Where does the meal that I ate last night, or the television that I watched, or the story that I was told, or the labels that I've been called, or the thing that I've been fixating on, or my ideas about so and so, based on my education or my cultural experience. How much of that can I still call free? Right. If all of it was the language that I speak, I didn't choose. Most people that are devout about a certain religion, most people, 90% of people who are hooked on a religion, right, were born into that religion, were led into that religion, were indoctrinated into that religion. So how we think, who we are, much of our wiring below the surface has got to do with the quality of food that we've been eating, the quality of sleep we've been getting, the ambient noise and light pollution and visual pollution around us, where we choose to spend our time on the internet. And we're not even aware of the effects that all those things are having on us. So even if we want to call it free will in the moment, my argument is it's not your agency that you are playing out. Your agency is a potential that is being co-opted by something else. Something else. Your agency is a potential that you have that can grow, but is currently being co-opted by other narratives, other stories, other intentionalities, other agenda. And here's the thing about humanity. That which operates most deceitfully is most aware of that dynamic of agency. Marketing companies are duplicitous. Politicians in their doublespeak and their propaganda. Internet trolls. Internet trolls are engaging with people who don't both understand the circumstance of what's happening. This one genuine human being thinks they're having an argument about the post that they've just read that upset them. And they think they're having an argument with another human being with a differing opinion, and the two of them are going to argue and hash it out, where one of those people is not playing the same game. One of those people is playing a game that says, I don't care what this guy says. I've got these like call center script responses for everything. And my job is to engage him, outrage him, name call him, make him mistrust the other team to such an extent that this guy just can't wait to get onto the next comment and the next thing and go and vomit out his aggression and his unrequited frustration somewhere else. And my job is to keep shaking the jar of ants so that all of the ants, left and right, red and blue, black and white, masculine and feminine, whoever's arguing about anything, no problem. As long as they're arguing about a polarized issue, I'll just take the opposite position and keep them arguing. Right. We're not all playing the same game. And there are people that are pretending to play the game that you are playing in business, in social discourse, in relationship, in politics, in food preparation, in every single thing that we count on as being a normative, foundational, healthy function of society. Just below that surface, behind a veil of our awareness, are actors, highly incentivized, operating carefully within the law, right, in a way that is not designed for your welfare, your betterment. It's duplicitous. It's deceitful, and our entire society is built this way. Right? It now becomes important. It now becomes important for us to understand these ideas of agency, the fact that it is a grabbable and losable capacity, the fact that we can become more and more aware of the games that are being played on us for various reasons. Right? How much of our news, how much of our social opinion, how much of our individual feelings, how much of our story and drama, and who we decide to blame and whose fault it is, and how blame and fault are supposed to be working. All of that is based on logic and ideas and understanding and narratives and framing and priming that has been given to us that we did A, not choose, and B, did not know what good and bad looked like at the time. We didn't know enough about ourselves. We took the bulk of our narrative and our story and our ideas on as young people. Our psychological framing of what's right and wrong, how to make sense of the world, but what a good apology is supposed to look like, what love is supposed to look like, what a good man is supposed to look like, what a teacher is supposed to look like, all of these fundamental ideas, right, we took on when we had no barriers and no discernment and no ability to qualify or distinguish between right or wrong, good or bad, because we had to comply with systems in order to get our needs met. That doesn't mean our parents were evil, but it means they were also initiated into such systems of confusion and such, or they were not initiated into the truth of what's really going on everywhere. And this doesn't need to mean that you need to subscribe to conspiracy theories, because even that is another form of being confused and entrapment and mucking with people's agency and selling them confusing bullshit. The problem is that now it's all too much of a mess. We don't know how to sift through all of this. And we don't know where we begin and end because we're not really wise to the interdependent, interconnected relationship that human beings have with each other, with the platforms that we operate on. And I mean the virtual platforms and the ecological platforms. We're all operating in these different operating systems, capitalism, communism, red pills, blue pills, all these ideas by which we organize the world and decide who's an idiot and who's not. And none of these systems are inherently compatible, but they are all running on the platform of the human psyche, which is operating on the platform of a human body, which are operating on the platform of a single shared earth, yeah, with a single connected set of resources of water, of atmosphere, and now the internet. Now we've got this ugly mirror of our collective consciousness, which we call the internet. And it's the only way we have of interacting intellectually with each other, of storing and analyzing and slicing and dicing all of our collective information. And it's a poison mirror, yeah? We do not have good communication. No, we do not have good communication. A whole bunch of folks just joined in here. We're talking about free will and agency, and this other word, sovereignty. A lot of people are banging on about agency at the moment, and a lot of people were banging on a while ago about free will, and a lot of people are now banging on politically about sovereignty. I'm a sovereign citizen, or that's my sovereignty. And we're talking about sovereignty as if it is about something, taking something from us, or us being independent of others, right? That's what sovereignty means. It means I don't have to listen to a government. That's a very, 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 very small framing to hold such an expansive horizon of conversation in. Yeah. Sovereignty to me means that I have this kind of self inside of myself that I recognize as paradoxical, as a multiplicity of persona and personalities. What makes me individual is by realizing my uniqueness, my authenticity, my form of genius, my way of feeling right about the world, or right about a choice, or right about a direction that I'm aiming in, or right about a certain moment, right? How I feel about that moment. How much am I subscribing to borrowed or inherited tropes or theories or philosophies or narratives? And now we're back at what has been horribly bastardized by Instagram spirituality, is the spiritual project of a kind of self awareness, self discovery, that I think is so necessary and important to this idea of actual sovereignty. Right? Sovereignty is the way in which I hold that boundary of me, so that I can take counsel in myself and be aware that there are strings that are pulling me, and where those strings are. And it's not a one and done accomplishment. It is a practice of a lifetime to keep discovering the unfolding reality of me, because I am an unfolding process, and reality is an unfolding process, and the people I'm in relationship with are an unfolding process. And what is missing is this recognition that change and such growth of that process is a constantly emergent thing. Right? I do so hope I'm making a good sense to folks here. And some of you have arrived at a fun moment. Let's see. Anna Maria Janes is here. Steph Torvey is here. Steph Torvey, you'll be happy to know my daughter's middle name is Torvey. Man for Moon, Beeson is here. And Tom says, we do not have a good communication model. Were you helping me remember my thoughts, Tom? We do not have a good communication model. Let me know what you meant there, Tom. Instagram spirituality, yeah. And we also have Instagram philosophy and Instagram stoicism and Instagram cuts on bloody everything. And it's just such a confusing mess. And our voices come from the hardcore atheist corner, who have some incredible insights, but they can't compute the fact that we have these mystical realities inside of us. We have these spiritual depths and capacity. The spiritual community, on the other hand, are a bunch of cosplayers. And then there's the esoteric community, which are all about the mystical scratchings and the beard stroking and like quoting ancient texts from thousands of years ago and arguing about their veracity and their origin. And I don't know what to do with all of that, because I've studied all of that, right? But it's like everybody's trying to build a puzzle, a complex puzzle, like a jigsaw puzzle, from a different corner, imagining in their mind that this all comes out in the wash in a different way. Not one of those three pictures are compatible, right? And then philosophy is in the middle, like this love child from a broken home, trying to please all the parents and trying to find a foothold in everyone's lap of certainty. And these are the minds by which we're trying to understand this convergent picture of our highly, highly complex moment in time. And no one's admitting that the other one might have an anchor point to all of this. And so we're not working together in this convergent model of what is possible. Tom says, we pick up communication skills from family and culture, no matter how dysfunctional those may be. Exactly right. And the normal that you call normal, the normal idea that you call normal as a Scientologist or as a Mormon or as a, somebody from a Polynesian island that believes in Pikiwaki, the mud god, that's going to give you a pig and as many coconuts as you can carry in the afterlife. That is normal, right? There was a time in ancient Greece where there was nothing more normal that when you went on a trip, you would pray to Poseidon Not only was it normal, it would be foolish not to. Yeah, and it would show a sign of hubris. Look at that man. He went on such an important trip and he didn't go and make the correct observances to the gods. What a fool, right? We would consider that absolutely normal. And this is not meant to be disparaging about the Melanesian with Pikiwaki or of any of our modern religions, but the Melanesian, at least, didn't have contact with modernity the way that we did, right? Didn't understand about cognitive biases and critical thinking and Plato's cave and all of these myriad ways in which we can understand that what we currently understand can be woefully limiting and limited, right? And it means there is no ultimate truth. This is the argument I have with Plato's cave. The assumption is always that the model is all these prisoners are chained to the back wall, staring at these flickering shadows of a fire behind them. And in between the fire behind them and themselves is this procession of people carrying objects, some of which are making noise. So there's goats bleating and chickens clucking, and somebody's carrying a vase, and somebody else is carrying a bicycle. And you're looking at these shadows on the wall, and between them, these prisoners are all looking at the wall now, and they're making up this fucking narrative of cosmology and of the world and of cause and effect and what is all going on, right? They're explaining the drama to each other, and they eventually converge in their bullshit, and they decide this is now what's happening, right? It has no bearing on reality. The whole thing is a fucking setup. Until one of them wriggles free and he realizes this, but he doesn't just turn around and look at the fire and go, game's up, boys, I figured it all out. The whole concept of a fire and a procession going on behind it and a fact that there is another reality occurring behind them that they had no context of before, that takes the brain ages and the psyche ages to like make a sense of, right? Eventually, the story goes that this person wriggles out and then he sees the bright light of the real sun and real forms, right? And this is now an allusion to awakening, wherein when the person goes back now into the cave to try and rescue his friends, they think that he's crazy. Because the first one that even tried to go with him didn't have the hours of staggering around and acclimatizing to the dark. And then suddenly, like, wincing and smarting at the sun. And so they'll convince themselves that what he's doing is dangerous because he's going to blind them. And they've got proof because this guy's still, his eyes are watering. Right. I followed Jeff. Jeff told us that something special was out there. It was a horror show. I just want to get back into the line and look at the shadows on the wall. Right. Our argument or our assumption now, listening to that wonderful story of Plato's cave, is that this is what it's like to transcend a previous smallness of understanding or awareness of ourselves, of a relationship, of a politician, of an issue, of a moment in time. And then when you spelunk your way out of that cave now, this is it, boys. This is the ultimate reality. My argument is that it's caves all the way up. All the way up. Right? It's caves all the way up. Whatever paradigm we make our way into next, and the better understanding that look at your history. This has happened every time, right? What's to say that the next breach that we make of understanding is ta-da, the finish line? It's not the finish line. It's just the next stepping stone of human understanding. So now we understand that we broke out of Plato's cave and one mob went into the modern Christian story, and one mob went into the other cave of reductionist science, and one mob went into, and now we're in this cave complex where everybody on the internet and on social media and in virtual reality can all have their own personal caves. And now we've got no convergence. Yeah, it's caves all the way up. It really is caves all the way up. And it's the only thing that makes sense if you're honest with yourself. Because if you think it's this cave and that cave, that's the problem. The problem is because then when I find the aha moment, when I have an awakening of some sort, I think, aha, I've cracked the case. This is it. Then you sell a good story, and now suddenly we've got Mormonism, or now suddenly we've got Dianetics, or now suddenly we've got the red pill theory. Because, yeah, that's it. Caves all the way up is such a good way to articulate it because it also makes room for the fact that not every cave leads necessarily up. Our paradigm shifts our awakenings, our stories, our realizations, we've been having them since we were kids, right? When you're a kid, you're in the kind of womb of the world, man. You don't know anything from anything. You believe the crap that's on TV. You believe the stories that you get told. You believe the Easter Bunny is real. And then you eventually get out of that, and then you're a teenager. Did you not just believe as a teenager, now you'd inherited all your agency, now you knew what life was about? How how laughable was our sense of drama as teenagers? How laughable. The things that we were so super serious about. Right. And how beautiful as well, because teenagers take themselves so profoundly seriously. So profoundly seriously. Right. But you have to do that. You have to get lost to get away from the first cave. The thing is, what's supposed to happen in a normative society is you leave the sanctuary of the village and you tell your parents to go fuck themselves and you go hang out with your peers and your teens and you guys are making your way in the world until you have your first serious rite of passage, your first serious ordeal. That could happen over months or years, right? Where you suddenly realize that there is merit to a village, there's merit to community, and that the adolescent peers that you are hanging out with that are all too cool for school, you can't make common purpose with these people. Because one of you are going to fall pregnant and have kids, or one of you is going to get a mortgage and shit's going to get serious. And then suddenly you can't play anymore. And your brain changes, right? Your brain changes. And then you've got to like now figure out, how do I reintegrate? Because I now want to belong to the adult club, right? But what a difficult journey that is at the moment, number one, because we don't prepare adolescents for that. We were not prepared for that. We don't know how to facilitate that initiation, number two. And number three, we didn't have that done to us. So we can't help teenagers coming through now. And our parents didn't have that done to them. So we rightly thought that our parents were full of shit because they were holding on to stories and beliefs and rules of probity that were ridiculous, right? Every generation outgrows the previous generation before it, inevitably. And we become more disenfranchised and more cynical. And then we give them all mobile phones and all social media, and we initiate them immediately into a system of control and manipulation that they never got the skills or the language or the field literacy to navigate. And there's three kinds of field literacy we need, many kinds now. But let's say the one is just the external world, right? And it begins with relationships and then steps up to neighborhood and community and blah, blah, blah. And eventually to nations and the peoples of the earth. And the world and nature and the atmosphere and all our commons. But there's a field literacy you need to navigate that with sanity. And then there's an interiority, a field literacy of the unfolding field internally that we never get taught to navigate. And I'm telling you right now, those clowns arguing on the internet about spirituality and what's right, unless they understand this full picture, you imperil yourself subscribing to their answers, right? This is so difficult. And so the reason I'm prattling about all of this is when it becomes impossible who to listen to, who to follow, when you can find no one worthy to lead you, you have to become worthy to lead yourself. You have to understand how to safeguard your own sovereignty, your own agency, so that you can grow them, so that you can and you have to develop this interiority, the inner life, the inner conversation, right? And you have to realize that our relationship with reality on the outer sense is a conversation as well. Tom says the materialist world view has humanity stuck at the level of Aristotle's sensory soul, which I'm not familiar with. Some people are catching glimpses of the rational soul. And if I can intuit what Tom is saying here, is somebody has come along and looked at possibly Aristotle's take on this, which means this is a pattern that's been playing out since Aristotle's time, which Aristotle gave language to of the sensory soul and the rational soul. I would frame that differently, but we're talking about pretty much the same thing. Ah, caves all the way up. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if I've made a good sense here today. Anna just joined. Anna, we're right at the end of our conversation. We were talking about free will and what it is and how much we have and how to use it. And we were talking about agency and what it isn't and how much of it we have and how enormously empowered we are as human beings right now. Enormously. We're so incredibly empowered right now. So incredibly empowered to connect. So incredibly empowered to act on our vocations. We're also incredibly empowered with all of these tools and all of these pathways created by so many beautiful people and so many beautiful systems. Not all of them have whole answers for our present moment, but they have such beautiful gifts in their hands for us, like breath work and mindfulness and meditation. They allow us a door of stillness that we can come to, by which we can step into and through to begin and deepen that interior conversation. Right? There's so much wisdom, as Tom was talking about now, so much. And we were talking about sovereignty, this idea that no one else is coming. I need to begin here. If I ever want to get to a place where we want human beings to normalize the institution of initiation socially, it's nothing weird. It doesn't require any culty vibes. It's just what human beings do. We do it badly at the moment. We prepare youth badly for the emerging moment that they're going to have to step into as adults. With no map, no keys to the map, no passport, we're all stowaways of our own uncertain future. And the way human beings responded to that eternal crisis in our history, in our human history, was via the institution of initiation. Elders, stewards, and curators as the conservative voices in a group, and then pioneers and visionaries as the progressive voices in a group, and then philosophers to try and make sense of all of that and a sameness out of all of that, and myth weavers and storytellers and artists and bards and creatives to weave out of our past, out of our burgeoning future, out of our emergence, out of all of these four temperaments and intuitions, a narrative that we can call our own. Yeah. That would be beautiful, but we're not there. We're at the moment where there's this little cycle that says good men create good times, and good times create soft men or weak men, and weak men create hard times, and hard times create strong men, and strong men create good times, and so it goes on. We're at the moment, we've entered an era of profound consequence. And right now, it's the leader and the elder and the collaborator and the curator and the visionary and the pioneer, the wayfinders, the mystics that now need to cohere. But in their coherence and in their finding of common cause, you can only find the sanity of such common cause and get by all of the language and the ideas which you import from your little caves as we spelunk towards higher truth and convergence as a species. And you can only retain your selfhood if you know what it is that you want to safeguard and retain and why. And so in order to do that, the first step is safeguarding your agency, developing your voice, understanding what it means to be seen in the world and to feel seen. And that's what I care about. And that's why I talk about such things. Anyway, folks, this has been going on for 50 minutes. I had a weird part in the middle where I had to answer the door and there was a gentleman that came here to fix the gate. But unless there's any questions, I'm going to hop off. And thank you very much for participating and the energetic engagement. And yeah, you should look back to it. And it's we had quite a fun meander through all of this, and I appreciate everybody showing up and taking part. It means so much to me now. I want to do something with all of this. You see, I don't just want to be the one speaking. I want to get the voices that are ready to participate in that convergent conversation. There's going to have to be a language we converge on. I mean, I've got my language and I've got good arguments as to why I choose my language and I can define what I mean. But at some point in time, every two pieces that come together to form an emergent whole, right? That coherence demands that we have a coherence of language. There's going to have to be a shootout. Someone's going to say, oh, I call it this, and I call it that, and I call it so and so. Now, in business, what we used to do is we used to create a lexicon, a glossary of aliases. We can call it maybe different things, but we have to agree on a leading term. It doesn't have to be mine, but we have to agree on a leading term. And those shootouts matter because semantics carry connotation and carry meaning, and there's not right or only words to use, but there are better and worse words to use. But the only way to arrive at that frontier when you can agree to better and worse without getting stuck on the wrong kind of snag or argument is when you have that interior sense of knowing and self-awareness and sovereignty. And you can realize that much of your resistance to certain language or certain words is you and your bullshit, Anyway, there's a guy that said yada emojis, Yoda. That is lambda symbol. My guy, I'm going to be real with you, man. I have no idea what you're trying to achieve. I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you're trying to say. I don't know if you're trying to be disruptive, if you're trying to be funny. I can't track, man. I can't track. So that's now your fourth comment that just, I don't get, man. I love having you here, but I don't know why you're here. Okay, folks, thank you very much. If there's any real questions, I'd love to get into them. Also, Erica, how did you get a moving picture in your profile? Erica has a picture of what looks like herself and a dog or a cat or something. I don't know how that gets done. No questions? How about some love hearts, guys? If you enjoyed that, hit me. Otherwise, I'm going to bid you good day and be on my way. Take care. Thanks.